Yeah, that's my favorite hymn in the, you know. Welcome to everyone. Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the UU Church of Tullahoma this October 24. Thank you for joining us this morning on Zoom or YouTube. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other, and faith in ourselves. Also to be welcoming to whomever we meet and kind to all living creatures. So gather around this light of hope as we share this time together. Do we have any announcements?
So yeah, I have a
And
few.
since I'm having,
Yeah.
Jim, would you call on people since you can see their hands and I can't?
Yep, I will. Yeah. So I'll start off. I've got several. First of all, our annual, or not annual, but our fall retreat is scheduled for November 6th. That's 2 weeks from yesterday. It's going to be just a one-day retreat at Tim's Ford State Park, same place we've had it previously. We plan to start around 10 o'clock and we will provide food. So I'm going to be sending out an email right after church to the whole group, whatever we have on our Google group, and ask you to let me know what kind of sandwiches you want, and we need a head count. So reply back to that email with your food preference if you plan to come, also how many people are coming. And we also need your help with the program for the day. So if you've got an activity or something you'd like to do, present to the group, Carrie is coordinating that and will work out the schedule for the day. So get with Carrie and let her know what it is you'd like to do that day. So that should be it on the retreat. As I said, an email will come out shortly. Second announcement is we received a letter from a person coordinating the Salvation Army Bell Ringer holiday event. And I guess in the past, Casey Redding used to coordinate that. So he would work with the overall coordinator and then get people to volunteer. So if somebody would like to coordinate that, take on the lead, let me know. I'll get you the contact information for the person who's running that here in the community. I'm also going to send an email out to the whole group on that as well. Third is we do have a board vacancy. As everybody know, Peter has left or isn't in the process of leaving. As Carrie said, he's heading back today and to work on getting his house sold. But with the board vacancy, the vacancy is the continuing, I forgot the word. Anyway, it's a 3-year position. Trustee, thank you, continuing trustee. It's a 3-year position rather than a 1-year position. And the idea is, or the primary responsibility is be the institutional memory for the board. So ideally, the person who will fill that vacancy probably has served on the board previously and knows a little bit about the church and the business of the church. So I will also be sending an email out to the whole group on that, asking for anybody if they want to volunteer for that or step up. Yes, Chuck.
I want to volunteer for that or step up.
Okay, thank you. We'll still send an email out to see if anybody else is interested, but thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chuck.
Yep, really do appreciate it.
I mean,
And then the final thing is our COVID numbers. They're going down, but not real fast. 2 weeks ago, we were at 38. Last week, we were 33. This week, we're 26. So it is going down. It's headed in the right direction, but it'll be a little while before we get down to that 5 to 10 range where we can reopen the church. So that is it for me. If somebody else has announcements, please raise your hand. Chuck.
2 things. One, the Thursday night discussion group will once again meet on Thursday night. I hate to be so predictable, but that's the way it works. So we will meet Thursday night via Zoom. If you need the link, let me or Tom or Rick or Tony or Patty, if she were here, let one of us know and we'll send you the link. Don't ask Rick, he might send you the wrong link. No, I didn't say that.
It's the same, it's this link.
But
It is,
Anyway.
Chuck, it is this link that we're using now.
no, it is not this link that we're using now.
It is not the
It's the
same
church
link?
No, it's not the same link. And that's, yeah,
Apologies.
that's okay. So
That's why Ricky might send you the wrong link.
yeah, yes.
Right.
Anyway, and the second announcement is they did this once, they're doing it again. The UU Hysterical Society folks, which their organization has something like the mirth and dignity in it. Anyway, in the name, I don't remember the exact name, but they are doing another actual worship service on Wednesday via Zoom. And I will send out the email with the details for anybody who's interested. The first one that they did was fun. They've done pieces of worship services before, but they hadn't done their own. And apparently the first one went well enough that they're doing it again. So, and these are, there's a lot of humor involved, but it has a serious message too. These are actual UU ministers running the show there. But so anyway, I'll send out the details on that if anyone's interested. It ought to be a lot of fun. It's Wednesday evening. I think it's 7. I forget. But that sounds right. 7 or 8. But I'll send it out.
Any other announcements? Tony?
Yeah, with these COVID numbers going down, we're not there yet. But your board has been working very diligently over these last several months to get ready to open. So now we're going to ask for your help soon, and we're going to need to coordinate a couple small cleanup days. Things like the outside of the church, cleaning leaves, cleaning gutters, that kind of thing, and a quick cleaning on the inside. So just keep that in mind, and we'll get that scheduled in the next couple of weeks. We want to be ready when it's time.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Go ahead, Chuck.
I was just going to say, I just looked at the email and it's actually, when I said, I can't remember if it's 7 or 8, it's at 7:30 on Wednesday. So now you know.
That sounds very interesting.
Oh, that was
Any other announcements?
That was a dog knocking a bowl off the couch. It's just this background noise here. We got 2 Fosters again.
Oh, only 2 this time.
Yeah.
Okay. Our speaker next Sunday will be our own Tony Mercado, and he is speaking on the positive power of no, lessons in resilience and perseverance. 2 things we all need.
Get your tickets early, folks. It's going to be a packed crowd. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be different than you're used to.
Oh, you're too good, Tony. If you would like to donate to our church, please make a check payable to the UU of Tullahoma and send to our treasurer, Karen Price, P.O. Box 331, Tullahoma, Tennessee, zips 37388. Our responsive reading for this morning is going to not be responsive. It is by John Eldridge. The leaves were trembling in a slight breeze yesterday evening, trembling in anticipation. It's as if nature knows a great secret and can hardly keep it in. Fall is like a sunset, and it whispers the secret of a sunset if we have ears to hear. I stand among aspen leaves, the color of the streets of the city of God, listening to creation whisper. This loss heralds a great return. Something golden is just around the corner, but you must let this go in order to find it. And our speaker this morning is Ricky Cruz, and he is speaking on World Mythology, Episode 1, Sumerian Myths. Take it away, Ricky.
All right, so I'm going to do a series of talks, well, hopefully be able to do a series of talks on different world creation flood myths and the comparisons with other mainstream myths and beliefs. And the reason I'm doing this is because in this world, we have a lot of different myths and beliefs throughout every society. And I'm really into sociology for the fact that in order to better understand those from other societies, we must take the time to learn why they believe what they believe in, because it's what makes up the core of their society. It's this endeavor that we will be better. It's in this endeavor that we will be better suited towards inclusiveness and understanding of each other. And one of the many reasons for discrimination of others is the failure to understand where they came from, why they see the world as they do. And I myself, as probably every person in the world, has been guilty of having some sort of prejudices due to their lack of understanding, just due to lack of my understanding. It was when I went to the Middle East. A second here, I'm sorry. It was when I went to the Middle East and became enculturated with that society. That's when I began trying to better understand different social constructs and ideologies. I definitely don't prescribe to all the tales of the flood and creation, but I feel that I'm better suited to be accepting and interesting through conversation and such. And what do I prescribe it to is that we came from somewhere and that there was a great flood at some time. It's only through education that we will be suited to maybe one day find the unifying answer to that question. But until then, it's simply through communication and acceptance that we can strive for inclusiveness amongst different societies. So the Sumerians, they were a non-Semitic, non-Indo-European people who flourished in southern Babylon from the beginning of the 4th to the end of the 3rd millennium BC. And during this time, the Sumerians, whose racial and linguistic affiliations are still unclassifiable, they were represented the dominant cultural group of the entire Near East. The cultural dominance manifested itself in 3 different directions. It was the Sumerians who developed and probably invented the cuneiform system of writing, which was adopted by nearly all the peoples of the Near East, and which the cultural progress of Western Asia may have been largely affected by. Number 2, the Sumerians developed religious and spiritual concepts together with a remarkable pantheon, which influenced profoundly all the people in their area. That to include the Jews, Christianity, Mohammedanism, Hebrews, Greeks, all of it. And a few of those spiritual and religious concepts have permeated even through our modern civilized world. So the Sumerians produced a vast and highly developed literature, largely poetic, and it has a lot of epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh and stories of such. They have myths, hymns, and proverbs, words of wisdom. These compositions are inscribed in cuneiform script on clay tablets, which largely date from approximately 1750 BC. They don't have specific dates on it, but it's roughly around 1750 BC. 1 second here. The date 2000 BC, which was assigned to the clay tablets on which the Sumerian compositions are inscribed, should be reduced by about 250 years or so as a result of recent studies in which a date as low as 1750 BC for Hammurabi, a key figure in their chronology, was detected. Thousands such literary pieces have been excavated in mounds in Sumer. More than 2,000, which are more than 2/3 of the source material, were excavated by University of Pennsylvania in Nippur, which is in Mesopotamia. As literary products, these Sumerian compositions rank pretty high among the creations of civilized man. So that's just like a little intro into what I'm going to talk about. So here's a couple of facts about the Sumerians. They were located in the cradle of civilization, The land between two rivers, which is what Mesopotamia stands for. It roughly goes from southern Iraq at the Gulf there outside of Basra, and it kind of does this little oval loop thing up into Syria. And it consists of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And it's believed to have, the Sumerians were believed to have invented cuneiform writing, which is currently the world's oldest known writing system in the world. Excuse me. And they were believed to have existed between 3500 to 2000 BC. And by the end of the third millennia BC, Sumer had mostly ceased to exist, and their language was dead, mainly because they were conquered by Semites, and it's Semitic Akkadian language. I'm certain some people here have heard of Sargon of Akkad. The creation of the earth. So this is a kind of a brief overview of the creation of the earth coming out of the Enuma Elish, which is one of the Sumerian tablets. Pardon me, I need to take a drink real quick. When in the height, heaven was not named, and the earth beneath it did not yet bear a name. And the primeval Apsu, who begat them, and Chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When the gods, none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. Lamu and Lamu were called into being. That the myth itself claims that in the beginning, human-like gods, they had to do all the labor. They had to get all the work done too. They had to, as the myth states, when the gods like men bore the work and suffered the toil of the gods was great. The work was heavy and the distress was much. And it was in this that the Sumerian gods decided that they wanted to create a labor force, worker ants. And so this is where the creation of humans comes into play. The poem begins with a description of how the gods had to work for their bread by digging out irrigation canals. The gods were dredging the rivers, were piling up their silt on projecting bends, and the gods, lugging the clay, began complaining. So Namu, who is either the sea or the goddess of the riverbed, goes to her son Enki, who is asleep, and he's asleep in the deep water. And then the Apsu, and entreat, which is the Apsu, pardon me, and then entreats him to rise from his bed as a fashioned servant of the gods. Fashioned servants of the gods, pardon me. I'm twisting my words around. Who, after all, is the god of wisdom. Enki, pardon me, is the god of wisdom, thinks of the germinating powers of the clay and water and of the abyss, and he tells Nami to have some womb goddess pinch off the clay and have some princely fashioners thicken it so she can, as the story says, without the sperm of a male, mold it or give it to birth. Mix the heart of the clay that is over the abyss. The good and princely fashioners will thicken the clay. You, Namu, do you bring the limbs into existence? Nima, who's the earth mother or birth goddess, will work above you. The goddess will stand by you at your fashioning. O my mother, decree its the newborn, decree its fate. Nima will bind upon it the image of the gods. It is man. Thus, man was created to relieve the gods of the work. The gods then decided to have a feast to celebrate their new creation. And Enki and Nima began to drink beer and start to feel good inside. Nima boasts that she, as the goddess of birth and gestation, is the one who determines whether the build of men turns out well or mishappen. Enki responds that he, the clever god, can find places in society for even the most handicapped people that Nima molds. From the clay of man with the shaking hands, from the clay of man with shaking hands. But Enki places him as an attendant of the king. Nima next makes a blind man, but Enki makes him a singer of tales. Nimma makes a person named Hobbled by Twisting Ankles. But Enki finds work for him with metal workers. Nimma continues to make handicapped people. A person unable to control his urine, a barren woman, a being with neither male nor female organs, and so on and so forth. But in each case, Enki was able to find a place in society for the creature, quote unquote, and to ensure it had a living. The woman who could not give birth, for example, was found a place, overseeing the weavers in the queen's household, while the sexless being was to stand before the king. So we continue on, and now knowing that she can't outsmart her brother Enki, Nimma throws down the clay in defeat. She stops. She's done with it. So Enki decides to make his own misshapen being, and he challenges Nimma to determine the mode of being of that newborn one. And as I continue to scroll down through my writing here, there we go. Okay, folks, I'm sorry. Now, Enki, in the manner which isn't quite clear in the tablets, causes a creature to be born whose name is the day was far off. In other words, the creature is born prematurely before its fated birth date. This creature is also extremely deformed. Its hands having the shakes, it could not put food to its mouth, the spine was crushed, and the feet and the hips were all brittle and breaking. So they were unable to walk and work in the fields. Nimma tries to feed the creature some bread, but it's so weak and feeble that it cannot reach out for the load she offers it. It cannot sit or stand or even bend its knees. Nimma's horrified by what Enki has made and curses him for it. The remainder of that tablet, it's not readable, it's not fixable. But apparently, as the story goes on, Nimma realizes that if such unformed and deformed beings are born with any sort of regularity, people will stop worshiping her. So Enki tries to appease her wrath by admitting that the deformed being is lacking in truth / work. And so Nimma was born to me, incomplete. The poem ends with a song of praise for Enki's male generative powers and for his cleverness in defeating Nimma. But the story itself seems to indicate that Enki cannot make a functional being without the help of the birth goddess herself. So notice how the story starts with gods needing to work for bread and ends with a creature who is unable to accept that bread. So from there, by the way, that's from the creation of humans by the Sumerian myth that was published in August of 2015. So next I'm going to move on to the Sumerian flood. And the reason I'm telling this story, pardon me, I got to get back to where I was at. The reason I'm telling this story is because I want to show that the different comparisons or the similarities between all the ancient myth stories and all the ancient flood stories. And these are going to be some of the more obscure societies that I talk about in these. So the Sumerian flood story, which was also known as the Eridu Genesis, the Sumerian creation myth. It's the oldest Mesopotamian text relating to the tale of the Great Flood, which would appear in later works such as Atarhahis, which was the 17th century BCE, and the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was circa 2150 to 1400 BCE. I know it's a wide range. The tale is also most famously told as a story of Noah and his ark from the biblical book of Genesis. The story is dated to 2300 BCE in its written form, but is thought to be much older, preserved by oral tradition until committed to writing, much like a lot of ancient societies did until their writing systems had evolved. The extent of the work is badly damaged with a number of where did I go? Okay. The extant work is badly damaged with a number of significant lines missing, but it can still be read and easily understood as an early Great Flood story. So scholars who have studied the text generally rely on the latter, Akkadian, Babylonian, Atarhahis, which tells the same tale to fill in the blanks of the missing text from the broken tablet. And so the story most likely influenced the Egyptian flood story known as the Book of the Heavenly Cow, which was dated in part to the first intermediate period of Egypt, but certainly was the inspiration for the later Mesopotamian works as well as the biblical narrative of Noah itself. The story was first discovered in 1893 when they were having just mass expeditions going across Egypt and the entire Middle East. And the good man in the version of this tale was chosen to survive the flood and preserve life on earth. And his name is King, he's a priest king. His name is King Zidsura of the city of Suprak, whose name means life of long days. The same figure appears as Adoratus, which means exceedingly wise, in the later work that bears his name as Utnapishtim. Pardon, it's very difficult to say. Which stands for he found life in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and as Noah, which stands for rest or peace in the book of Genesis. The Sumerian flood story, it begins with the creation of the world, the black-headed people, the Sumerians, and then the animals. The Sumerian gods who undertake the act of creation, and Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag, who would remain amongst the most powerful Sumerian deities for centuries until they were eclipsed by Amorite theological paradigms under Hammurabi of Babylon. And later the Assyrians, after humans and animals were created, the gods decree the establishment of cities, beginning with Eridu, which was considered the oldest city in the world. Each of these cities are given to a god to oversee, thereby establishing the tradition of every city having its patron deity. And you see that in a lot of other societies too. Cities having their own patron deity, even down to the individual household having their own patron deity. And they also have a tradition of having their own reference system to be made for the establishment of irrigation systems. Sorry, this thing is bothering me like crazy. Technical difficulties, folks. Okay, so after that first part of the story that I told you, there is a number of clay tablets that are either missing or broken, so they're unable to fill in certain parts of the story. I think it's something like 38 or 39 lines were missing. That's why later on in the Adoratus is very similar to that tale and basically fills in the holes that they have in the Sumerian myth. In Adoratus, though, Enlil sends a drought, then a plague, and then famine to the earth to decrease the population and quiet the roar of humans. Because at this time, people had become too numerous and too loud to disturb, that they were disturbing his rest, basically. But each time Enki tells the people what they should do to reverse Enlil's plagues, and they're able to go on with their lives as before. It's probable that these details also appeared in the earlier Sumerian myth, where Enki has the same role. The story then continues, noting how the gods all swear an oath, presumably that they won't interfere with whatever Enlil's decision to destroy humanity is. And then the central character to the tale is introduced, who is as Zidsura, the king of the city of Suprak, and a priest. Since Enki has taken the oath not to interfere with the flood, along with all the other gods, he can't warn him directly, so he talks to a wall. Makes sense, right? Sometimes we all feel like we're talking to the wall. And he has the king stand on the other side of the wall, so when he's talking to the wall, the king can hear him through the wall. And it's at this point where there's a lot more of the story missing as well. But then it continues on with a depiction of a flood which rages for 7 days and 7 nights until the sea's quiet and Utu, the sun god, appears. Zadura makes a hole in the side of the boat, and Utu, in the form of the sun's rays, enters. Zadura dutifully makes a sacrifice to the god, but what happens after is lost through most of the missing lines. In the end, Enlil seemed to have repented of their decisions, as they are grateful that Zadura has preserved their creations. They grant him eternal life in the paradise of the land of Doman. Based on fragments of the tablet, it seems the story keeps going and is concluded after another 39 tablets, but is lost. So the Sumerian flood story, it's considered the first written account of the popular worldwide myth of a flood sent by someone on high. And it appears in almost every culture within the ancient world. It's pretty universal. And it's very similar in story all along each culture. So, and there's a lot of historical markers that show that there was some sort of great flood in parts of the world during a certain time. Modern day scholars tend to reject this interpretation and instead suggest that an early story of a great flood and the destruction of humanity resonated with an ancient audience and came to be widely repeated. Traveling through trade from one region to another, each culture adapted the story to their own needs and vision, and so the original was altered to, plus or minus degrees, as it was told each time, kind of like the game telephone line. Say one word to one person, have them whisper it down the line. It's generally going to be a little bit different by the time it gets to the end. The original may or may not have been the Sumerian flood story, but many scholars today, they believe that it was. The story continues, noting how, pardon, I think I already read that part. I did, I went the wrong direction. So the following text comes from the literature of ancient Sumer. The opening line referencing the annihilation of my creatures might be suggesting that the gods initially gave human beings long lifespans as co-workers with the gods, kind of like in the Christian religion. Some of the angels were mad that God saw humans as equals to the angels, and some of the angels may not have liked that. So as the story is given in Adoratus in this later work, after the flood, measures are taken by the gods to limit human lifespan and increase their death rate with all kinds of different details missing from the text. And so here's some more of the flood story, and that was continued after the flood itself. I will stop the annihilation of my creatures, and I will return the people from their dwelling grounds. Let them build many cities so that I can refresh myself in their shade. Let them lay bricks and many cities in pure places. Let them establish places of divination in pure places. And when the fire quenching is arranged, the divine rights and exalted powers are perfected and the earth is irrigated, I will establish well-being there. And then after Enlil and Enki and Nursong have fashioned the black-headed people, they also made animals multiply everywhere and made herds of four-legged animals exist on the plains, as if been befitting. So here's, after this part, there's another section that has roughly 30 so missing lines. And then it will continue. I will oversee their labor. Let the builder of the land dig a solid foundation. After the of kingship had descended from heaven, after the exalted crown and throne of kingship had descended from heaven, the divine rights and the exalted powers were perfected. The bricks of the cities were laid in holy places. Their names were announced and they were distributed. The first of the cities, Eridu, was given the Nudimmud, the leader. The second, Bad Tabira, was given the mistress. The third, they're trying to call me. The fourth, Zambir, was given to hero Utu. The fifth, Surupag, was given to Sud. And after the names of these cities had been announced and they had been distributed, the river was watered. Then there's a whole bunch of more lines missing from the clay tablets. And it continues with Seat in heaven, flood mankind. Seat in heaven flooded mankind. So he made the Nitchid. Holy Anannan made a lament for his people. Enki took counsel with himself. An, Enlil, Enki, and Nirsung made all the gods of heaven and earth take an oath, invoking An and Enlil. In those days, Zildura, the king, the good priest, he fashioned the humble, committed, reverent, day by day, standing constantly at something that was not a dream. And it appeared conversation taking an conversation taking an oath by invoking heaven and earth in the cure, the gods, and a wall. Zudsura standing at his side heard, side wall standing at my left, side wall, I will speak words to you. Take heed of my words, pay attention to my instructions. A flood will sweep over the land in all the directions. A decision that the seed of mankind is to be destroyed has been made. The verdict, the word of the divine assembly cannot be revoked. The order announced by An and Enlil cannot be overturned. Their kingship, their term has been cut off. Their heart should be rested about this. Then it continues on after missing some more. And so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Okay. So the story, it's preserved fragmentary of old Babylon and Assyrian versions. And one more second, I apologize. This is very difficult for me this morning for some reason. Throughout this series of talks, I'll be looking to chronicle the more obscure societies that are often left from discussion. However, I'll be drawing comparisons from the larger belief systems as a way to show the evolution of these beliefs throughout history. And this is why I feel it's important to summarize the biblical accounts as well as some others in this next little grouping. So we have the biblical flood myth. These Babylonian mythologies have close affinities with the biblical story of the flood and are the source of such features as the building and provisioning of the ark, its flotation, and the dispatch of the raven and the dove, as well as the part played by the human protagonist in the biblical account. The biblical account of the deluge, which is found in Genesis chapter 6, features Noah as the hero of the story. In this account, Noah is represented as the patriarch who, because of his blameless piety, was chosen by God to perpetuate the human race after his wicked contemporaries had perished in the flood. According to the text, a righteous man, Noah, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Thus, when God beheld the corruption of the earth and determined to destroy it, he gave Noah divine warning of the impending disaster and made a covenant with him, promising to save him and his family. Noah was instructed to build an ark, and in accordance with God's instructions, he took into the ark male and female specimens of all the world's species of animals, from which the stocks might be replenished. Consequently, according to this narrative, the entire surviving human race descended from Noah's 3 sons and their wives. The religious meaning of the flood is conveyed after Noah's survival. Having safely landed on Ararat, he then built an altar on which he offered the burnt sacrifices to God, who then bound himself to a pact never again to curse the earth on humanity's account. God then set a rainbow in the sky as a visible guarantee of his promise. In this covenant, God also renewed his commands given at the creation, but with 2 changes. Humankind could now kill animals, eat meat, and murder would be punished by humans. Despite the tangible similarities of the Mesopotamian mythologies and the biblical flood, the biblical story has a unique Hebraic perspective. And in the Babylon stories, the destruction of the flood was the result of a disagreement among the gods, while in Genesis, it resulted from the moral corruption of human history. The primitive polytheism of Mesopotamia's versions is transformed into the biblical story, into an affirmation of the omnipotence and benevolence of the one righteous God. So here's a couple other flood myths. In Greek legend, you have Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, who is the creator of mankind, he's the equivalent of Noah. When Zeus, the king of the gods, resolved to destroy all humanity by a flood, Callion constructed an ark in which, according to one version, he and his wife rode out the flood and landed on Mount Parnassus. According to the Indian flood mythology, the man Manu was the sole survivor of the great flood, combining the characteristics of the Hebrew Bible figures of Noah and Adam, the first man. The Shatapatha Brahmana recounts how Manu was warned by a fish to whom he had done a kindness, that a flood would destroy the whole of humanity. I giggled when I said he was told by a fish, because it made me think of an old movie with the guy who played Barney Fife, where it was like half cartoon and he became a fish. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a hilarious movie. When the flood receded, Manu, the sole human survivor, performed a sacrifice, pouring oblations of butter and sour milk into the waters. After a year, there was born from the waters a woman who announced herself as the daughter of Manu. These two then became the ancestors of the new human race to replenish the earth. In the Mahabharata, which is the great epic of Bharata, the Bharata dynasty, the fish is identified with the god Brahma, while in the Puranas, which is the ancient lore, it is Matsya. I think I pronounced that correctly. The fish incarnation of the Lord Vishnu. Now, the Aztecs believed, as many different Native American nation tribes, that 4 worlds had existed before the present universe. And there are a few that even believe that we're currently in the 5th world. The worlds or suns had been destroyed by catastrophes, and humankind had been entirely wiped out at the end of each sun. The 4th sun, this is the ancient Aztec belief, by the way. The 4th sun, Nahait Adal, which means 4 water, ended in a gigantic flood that lasted 52 years. Only 1 man and 1 woman survived to shelter in a huge cypress, where they were later turned to dogs. And I have a large bibliography on all the stuff I talked about, but if you notice throughout each of those kind of little clips, there's a unifying thing of there was a great flood, there was a hero, and if you can revert back to our this talk I did about our beliefs and myths the same, and how each of them have some kind of hero epic, you can see that throughout this this entire talk with each different society that I talked about. And so, like, the next time I will talk about another ancient society that is obscure, and I'm going to draw from these different ones like Christianity and Catholicism. I'm going to draw and some of the more modern religions. I'm going to draw from them, but I'm not going to talk about their creation myths. I'm going to talk about the more obscure ones. That way we can get a better view of these micro societies that created the macro societies around them. And with that, I am complete.
Thank you, Ricky. That was very interesting. I don't have a lot of knowledge about the Sumerians, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to close with, as we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return. It's right at 11 o'clock. So let's take a 10-minute break and be back at 10 after